of Mexico. And finally, Snowmageddon, feet of snow in the nation's capital, now turning to ice after hundreds of people were left stranded in their cars for more than a day. We've got this and a whole lot more, so come with us and question more. So I want to start tonight with the breaking news of the president of Kazakhstan declaring a state of emergency in the country's largest city of Almaty. Now, to Americans, they know Kazakhstan from the movies, but to the rest of the world that's watching closely, these protests started small, simply over high gas and fuel prices, much like the gas hikes we've seen here in the United States. But these protests spiraled so much over the weekend that the president had to respond with this.
I urge you to be prudent and not to yield to provocations from inside and outside, to the euphoria of rallies and permissiveness. Appeals to attack the offices of civilian and military departments are completely illegal. They are crimes, and punishment may follow. The government will not fall. We need not a conflict, but mutual trust and dialogue.
Now, the president added later, after no one took that advice, quote, both your well-being and your country's place in the modern world are now at stake. So let's pull back the curtain for a second and look at the country itself and why all of this is important. So you'll see in this map here, Kazakhstan is the meat to this Russia-China sandwich. However, Kazakhstan shares more than half of its border with Russia. It's the largest landlocked country with zero access to any oceans. But what it lacks in water, it's got a whole lot of something else, something superpowers love, oil. So why these protests and why now? Well, the protests started in the western region of Kazakhstan, which is where most of the oil comes from and where most of the oil workers are located. Now, back in 2011, there were a number of oil workers who were actually killed in protests demanding better pay and working conditions. Well, as of late, a lot of those same people in that region, they're now protesting, demanding the price of fuel be cut in half. Well, retailers, they agreed to cut the price by a quarter, but the president says that further cuts, they're impossible, all because of production costs. Now, there used to be government caps on the price of fuel in Kazakhstan, but as of late, the government decided to lift those caps, almost welcoming in capitalism to its gas prices. Now, if you know capitalism, you get it, which is why we're seeing video like this. Violent protest in Kazakhstan's largest city that mirror the violent protests we saw here in the United States every day in the summer of 2020. Now, one big reason why this is very important, Kazakhstan is a big part of Russia's sphere of influence. So much so, in fact, that when the Soviet Union actually broke up, Kazakhstan gave up its nuclear weapons and promoted peace and mediation in international disputes. Interesting trivia fact for you, Kazakhstan is one of the most important world mediators and has mediated numerous conflicts around the world. So what would be the West's equivalent? Well, this would be like Canada, who's in the American sphere of influence, on the brink of bursting at the seams. So joining us now with his take on the situation in Kazakhstan, we are joined by former Pentagon official Michael Malouf. Michael, I know you have a lot to say on this, but kind of what do you make now of this recent state of emergency in Almaty?
Well, it's been forthcoming for many, many years. The people there are generally very poor. Just that little bit of hike it's LPG, liquefied petroleum products, which they use for their cars and in many cases for their fuel, for cooking. It went up like the equivalent of 28 cents, but for the average Kazakh, that's a lot. Mm-hmm. The country is polarized in terms of rich and poor. There's hardly any middle class. I mean, there is no middle class. And this is and for years, going back to Nazarbayev, the original president, he he and the current president are very much seeking wealth and a lot of accumulation of wealth, and the people have seen this, and they're basically fed up. And what's problematic here is that Kazakhstan is, as you point out, the meat of the sandwich between Russia and China. Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of the few areas where Russia and China have issues for influence in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan was part of the former Soviet Union, as was Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and so on. So it's Kazakhstan is perhaps one of the richest of all of those countries. It's the most liberal Muslim country of the Central Asian countries, but at the same time, it has tended to want to gravitate more toward Russian influence as opposed to Chinese influence. The capital used to be in Almaty, mm-hmm. Which is further south. But that became so overwhelmed by Chinese influence that the previous president moved the capital to Astana, out in the middle of nowhere, to be about 800 kilometers north, to be much closer to Russia. I've been to both locations. I used to, by way of background, when I was at the Defense Department, I helped train border guards in Kazakhstan, as well as in Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. And the influence of the Chinese need for land and agriculture has pushed China's desire for greater access into Kazakhstan to grow crops and to farm, and you can see that in the lower portions of Kazakhstan today. So it's the people themselves are just being whipsawed, and they're not getting any better economically, and as a consequence, you're seeing what you're seeing. And this could spread. And the problem for China and Russia is the fact that if the more radical Islamists are to take over, for China especially, which borders right on the Xinjiang province in the western portion, where you have the Uyghurs, this could create real problems for China.
Now, Michael, as we're looking at that, can we throw up that map there one more time, Director Peter, for me? That map there, you see on one side, you've got Kazakhstan. The other side, you've got a little country we've been hearing about a lot lately, Ukraine, on the other border, on the other side of Russia there. When it comes to these two countries, what do you think Russia's going to do as far as putting all of their eggs in which proverbial basket, as we'll say? Are they going to focus on Ukraine, or do you think they're going to pull back and go more to Kazakhstan? What do you see kind of happening? I got about a minute left for you.
From the Russian perspective, I would say
yes.
The Ukraine problem is perhaps the most critical at the moment because of what is perceived by the Russian side to be an encroachment by NATO up to and to include Ukraine, which wants to join NATO and in fact the European Union. Kazakhstan is an entirely different thing, and that can be handled. That's not as urgent as you have with the dilemma in Ukraine. After all, the Russians have put in about over 100,000 troops on the Russian side up against Ukraine, just in case the Ukrainians decide to do something that will create that will prompt a war. I mean, it's that imminent. I think that more assistance can come from Russia to assist Kazakhstan and try to relieve that dilemma. The president of Kazakhstan tonight has actually put a cap on the price of gas. It's actually brought down the price of gas below what it used to be before he instituted these measures, these other economic measures that prompted the price rise. So now, and he may have to be compelled to do this across other areas too, in order to mollify the people so that they don't rise up. And it's very cold there right now, so it would be a real problem for them if things kicked up.
They need their heat, and we're going to keep on this story and keep on it with you.
Yeah.
Michael Maloof, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is resending his message again that he is offering asylum to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in his country. The offer marking yet another attempt to pardon Assange, who has yet to give his reply. Trinity Chavez picks up the story from here.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador standing by his repeated attempts to help pardon WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
We are willing to offer Assange asylum in Mexico.
López Obrador once again reiterating his intention to offer asylum to Julian Assange during his daily press conference in Mexico City on Monday.
Assange is ill, and it will be a show of solidarity, of fraternity, to allow him to receive asylum in a country that Assange decided to live, including Mexico.
López Obrador said in January 2021 he wrote to then-President Donald Trump before he left office to try to help pardon Assange, but he never received a reply.
Before the end of the administration of the President Donald Trump, I sent a letter asking him to be exonerated, to be forgiven. You know, at the end of the U.S. presidential terms, presidents can make use of this power. Well, I sent that letter. It has no reply. But I offer to make it known today, and I endorse Mexico's commitment to comply by offering asylum and asking the U.S. government for humanitarian attitude.
Assange is accused by the U.S. of 18 counts related to leaking confidential U.S. military and diplomatic records in violation of the Espionage Act. American authorities say he published thousands of confidential documents on the country's activities in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, marking one of the biggest leaks of classified information in modern U.S. history. And last month, Assange moved even closer to facing criminal charges in the United States after an English court ruled that he could be extradited to the U.S. to face espionage charges.
Julian exposed the crimes of CIA torturers, of CIA killers, and now we know that those CIA killers were planning to kill him too.
The High Court of Justice in London approved the extradition of Assange to the U.S. on December 10th. He is currently being held in Belmarsh Security Prison.
Meantime, Assange's health is dwindling. Doctors for Assange, representing more than 250 doctors in 35 countries, say he is in a dire state from his prolonged psychological torture, which includes 11 years of arbitrary detention, medical neglect, solitary confinement, and obstruction to access to his lawyers that has violated the rule of law and due process. Trinity Chavez, RT New York.
So joining us now with his perspective on Mexico and Julian Assange, we are joined by the host of On Contact. Honored to have you, Chris Hedges. Chris, what do you make of all this? Why do you think there hasn't been a response from Assange? Do you think, is it that he doesn't know that this is on the table?
That's a hard question to answer. Julian is in very precarious psychological and physical decline. We know from the court proceedings that he was observed, for instance, banging his head against the wall, pounding his fist into himself. He's on antidepressants. He suffered a stroke, we now know, during the October proceedings. So the exact state of his physical and psychological condition is unknown, but we know it's not good. And the Mexican president referenced that. So it just may be that he's dealing with so many issues at this particular time that he's not in a position by which he can give a public statement. But I don't know. That's speculation.
And, you know, Chris, I actually saw your interview on the Breaking Points podcast when they had the benefit for Julian Assange. And, you know, they also did it for another man who was the other lawyer. I'm forgetting his name, blanking on his name, but where they got him out. But suddenly with Julian Assange, we see nothing. Wall-to-wall coverage today. I know that the January 6th committee wants to release Sean Hannity's text messages. Nothing on this Mexican president's announcement saying that he will give Julian Assange asylum. Why is it that this is never out in the media, the mainstream media? Nothing ever on Julian Assange, Chris. Why?
Well, unfortunately, the corporate or mainstream media marches in lockstep in terms of demonizing Assange. There's been, since 2010, the release of the Iraqi warlord's a systematic and well-orchestrated campaign of character assassination, and also because so many of their pundits come from the intelligence community or the military, who are deeply hostile to Julian. Remember, in 2017, WikiLeaks exposed or leaked or published these leaked documents about so-called Vault 7, the hacking tools by the CIA. This is when Mike Pompeo was running the CIA and gave this blistering speech. So there's been quite an effective attempt or campaign on the part of the government to try and frame, in the words of Mike Pompeo, WikiLeaks and Assange as a hostile power rather than as a publisher or as a journalist. And unfortunately, that the echo chamber of the media has played along, with a few exceptions, ironically, Sean Hannity being one, but not many.
Chris, I don't want to get crazy personal here, but you have uncovered a lot of stuff in your journalistic career as well. Many would call you a whistleblower. You lost your job over it. You know, it's one of these things where when you have a book that comes out, you have lines of people out the door. I even know from our producers, they've told me thousands of people want to meet you and want to talk to you. Same with Julian Assange. With you kind of having done this yourself, what is it like to go to bed at night knowing that the government probably doesn't like you? They're going to tell you that you did something wrong. When you look at Julian Assange's mental state, I mean, your heart breaks for him. But I mean, how do you live every day knowing that they're telling you that you did something wrong when you didn't?
The difference is, I mean, I think that the fact you retain your integrity and you know what those who make that kind of Faustian deal with the powers that be, what they've sold, if we want to talk in religious language, their soul. I would say that, the difference, of course, between my situation and Julian's, which is quite stark, is that they've really managed to isolate him both physically, which has contributed to his marked deterioration, but also isolate him socially. They've worked very, very hard, and we know from leaks, from documents early in 2010, 2011, this was the plan, the whole false charges about sexual assault in Sweden, to divert the issue or divert the attention away from the war crimes, the malfeasance, the corruption, the lies that he exposed, that he and WikiLeaks exposed, and make it all about him. And in that sense, they've got a big smoke machine. It works, and it's been it's horrible on a personal level, on a human level, but it's also tragic for the rest of us who care about the shining a light into the inner workings of power. He has the most important journalistic work in our lifetime, without question, on a range of issues, not just the endless wars in the Middle East, but the torture in Guantanamo, the lying by Hillary Clinton. All of this came out of WikiLeaks. And then we have to remember that in countries around the world, Tunisia, Haiti, everywhere else, WikiLeaks, through the release of these cables, exposed all sorts of corruption and nefarious deals by governments. I mean, the whole Arab Spring really arose because of the information that came from WikiLeaks. So it's a tremendous public service. It's just heartbreaking as a journalist, because what they're attempting to do by extraditing him and certainly railroading him is criminalize the possession of classified material, which I have had when I worked for the New York Times, and that publication. To possess it or to publish it will become a crime. That's what, so there's the self-interest of these media outlets, you would think, would drive them to stand up for Assange. But of course, whatever their myopia is, they're not doing it.
Exactly. Chris Hedges, honored to talk to you again, my friend. Stay well.
Thank you.
Still had thousands still without power after the massive winter weather storm we had here in the nation's capital. We've got to look at the conditions on the ground. In the meantime, download our portable TV app, because it's TV as it's meant to be. We got live shows and sports 24/7, so much more. TV as it's meant to be. Go download it while we wait for you to come back. Well, Monday Friday's winter storm dumped more than 10 inches of snow in many parts of the mid-Atlantic states, including here in the nation's capital. The storm impacting air travel, trains, and commuters on roads. Well, here, hundreds of drivers, as of this broadcast, they are still stuck on the highway, I-95, and